G'day folks, it's Steve here and welcome to the PCDU recording studio. What I'm doing here right now is just a bit of an edit on episode 34 of Plane Crazy Down Under. It's just about ready for release. What I thought I'd do here is just let you watch along for a few minutes and see what is involved in the editing process. It's a very long and arduous process, not arduous but tedious anyway, and it usually involves quite some hours. This episode that we've been doing, we've actually recorded a number of interviews over the last 2 to 3 weeks. They're all spliced in, and as you can see here, what you're seeing on the screen here now is Audacity, the program that I use to edit the show, and that's a graphical representation of Grant and my voice. So I'll just let you watch along for a few minutes. Feel free to send in any feedback or questions about what I'm doing here. It's probably not that exciting to watch, but some people have told us that they're curious to see how it's done. This section that I'm editing right now is the end credits, basically not the end credits, but the end piece, basically at the end of all the interviews. So Grant and I actually recorded this yesterday, and I'm just sitting down and cutting out all the ums and ahs and all the things that you're hearing me say now live on this video that hopefully you wouldn't see me say quite so often. So come along for the ride. So just to give you an idea of where we're up to when you listen to the show, I'll just take it back a little bit. What are we up to here? 125. So we're just coming out of the interview here with Gary Clark of The Swamp. That's his voice track there at the top. This track here is transition music. So when you hear it, I'll isolate the audio there. And you can hear that playing underneath. But of course the way you would hear it is you'll actually have the voice track active.
Reading it.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Gary. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thanks very much.
And there's the music fading out. And here comes me and Grant.
Welcome back, folks. Well, there you go, Grant. That's a pretty full program and really interesting chat there with Gary Clark. It's always good to catch up with people and get their aviation story. One of the things that we really enjoy doing here on the show. And yeah, The Swamp. I must admit that I'm a fair way behind. I actually get it delivered to my inbox every day, but it's one of those things that gets filed away, and I don't always catch up with it. But interesting that Gary Clark was saying there that Ding Duck wasn't his favourite character, whereas I would probably judge that most people that read The Swamp probably would regard Ding as the favourite character. It's certainly mine.
Yeah, well, that whole, go underdog, come on dude, you can do it. But yeah, I still really love right now the one of Ding going to study and suddenly the ground opens up in front of him, and then later an asteroid comes down and hits the homework and things like that. And that's very topical for me at the moment as I'm trying to get time to do my own study. And it's every time I go to do it, something else gets in the way.
Yeah, so Grant, you should tell the listeners what you've been studying, speaking of that.
Okay, so that's the point that I'm up to now, and although that all sounds rather smooth, there's actually little bits of bloopers and bits and pieces that I've cut out of that track to make it sound more smooth. So watch now as I'll just go through and listen. I like to take out breaths if they're really loud and obvious, and any ums and ahs, which is something that I'm famous for. Grant doesn't do them as much, but I'm terrible for them. So I hope you'll be able to see what I'm doing here on the screen, and we'll do a few close-ups a bit later on. Now there's a breath there, so you can listen to that. So we'll take that out.
What you've been studying, speaking of that.
It's everything I need for my balloon pilot's license. It's navigation, meteorology, and so on as they apply to ballooning. Plus all.
Now you heard Grant say there, and you can actually see that on the screen here. I can actually highlight that and play it. So now what I'm going to do is silence that, and then I'll bring those two together, close that gap. So now when you play it,
on as they apply to ballooning, plus also the code.
And it sounds like you didn't say it at all, and that's where all the work comes in, because you basically got to find the spot you want to edit, do the edit, and then take it back and listen to make sure it sounds good. We were lucky there that it did come out okay. Sometimes it doesn't, and you've got to readjust and do all sorts of fancy footwork just to get it done.
and so on as they apply to ballooning, plus also the code of conduct dealing with landowners and how, as well as how to actually fly a balloon. You know, it's not just put a bit of heat in, pull a bit of well as how to actually fly a balloon. You know, it's not just put a bit of heat in, pull a bit of heat out. There's a little bit more to it than that.
What is the screaming part as it hits the ground, or do you have
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The stuff.
So it's just a matter of taking little bits and pieces out, and you can hear them. If it's a sharp fall away, we might fade that out so it sounds a little more natural.
Hits the ground, or do you have
Yeah, totally. The stunned look of surprise as the ground gets ever larger.
Yes.
It is.
So you can hear there how Grant's sort of searching around for words there, which is something you don't actually realise you do until you hear your own voice back a number of times. So what we'll do here is we'll take a little bit of that out, just this bit. Okay, so now we're going to delete that section. We're going to try and delete that section. There we are. And now,
it is sort of put a bit.
so now it sounds like this.
It is.
Now, I actually think that's a bit too close together, so we'll just leave that in.
It is sort of put a bit of heat in, pull a bit of heat out, but it's knowing when to put the heat in and when to pull it out. That's the tricky part.
Well, of course, as we all know, according to Douglas Adams, the major skill in. Of course, as we all know, according to Douglas Adams, Well, of course, as we all know, according to Douglas Adams, the major skill in learning how to fly is simply the skill of throwing yourself at the ground and missing.
That's correct.
So we'll take a breath out there, we'll take that gap out of there, and just for good measure I'll take this one out of here as well. So now it just sounds a little bit closer together.
Learning how to fly is simply the skill of throwing yourself at the ground and missing.
That's correct.
So I guess you could apply that to ballooning somehow.
Well, I can only hope that the flying school that I wound up at Mildura has some of some of Douglas Adams' more favourite methods of distracting people, so they do miss the ground when they.
So once again, just taking the little gaps out here and there.
Methods of distracting people, so they do miss the ground when they throw themselves at it.
Well, let's hope that.
Now we'll take a little chuckle out of that one.
Ground when they throw themselves at it.
Well, let's hope that nobody. Next time, if you need to throw a bit of ballast out, Grant, you wouldn't throw the odd passenger out, would you? I mean,
Well, it depends who the passenger is and what.
Grant, you wouldn't throw the odd passenger out, would you? I mean,
Well, it depends who the passenger is and what their ballast rating is, I guess.
you know your temper, Grant. You have to.
Come fly with me.
Yeah, all the way to the ground.
Hey, look.
So obviously this is getting towards the end part in the show as you'll hear it. This is just before we did the listener mail.
Hey, look, can you see that? It's a bit far away. It's about 3,000 feet down below us. Here, I'll help you see it clearly.
Anyway, mate, that just about wraps.
So once again, just taking the breaths and the gaps out.
Clearly.
Anyway, mate, that just about wraps it up for now, except I can hear the postie coming, I think.
Oh, this postie is really cool. He always comes just at the right moment.
I don't know how he does it, mate. We must have him on a good retainer or something.
Yeah, so we'll just save that project where it is. Now, a lot of people, and so I'll give you a bit more of our amateur hour video a bit later on. Hope you found that interesting, folks. Cheers.